So again, I'm just going to be showing you these tools. And then what we're going to do is after that, I'm going to give you an exercise that really is just leveraging some of these tools. So all of you went through the principles classes, is that correct? I know I always ask that, but if you haven't, that's okay too. I want to take a quick recap on a couple of the deformers we learned in that class, just to remind you they're there, okay? The reason for this is there are occasionally times when you need to animate something, but you don't need a full rig for it, right? You just want to get some form of animation out of it, right? Let's say we have an object that's kind of flimsy, and you just need to be able to bend it a little bit, right? Just like it's sort of blowing in the wind, right? Why create a full rig for that? We could just use the bend deformer and put some keyframes on that and get a little bit of motion out of it, right? Sometimes there are things you need to animate that are so unique, like in the way that they have to be animated, that they're really, like to create a rig for it would take weeks, right? And you just need it for a really quick animation, right? So I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you a video in a minute here that I want you to kind of, not copy, but attempt yourself, right? Attempt your version of it. But first, let's just talk about some of these deformers. Go back to my standard view here. So again, to deform anything, like we have joints, we have the nonlinear deformers, we have all sorts of different deformers. But to deform anything, we have to have some mesh to deform, right? If we're thinking about animation, what we've been doing so far, we've been moving the whole object, or we've been rotating the whole object, or maybe scaling the whole object, right, at most. A deformer is a manipulation of this object in a way that's not moving the entire object, right? It's a systematic way of manipulating the sub-objects, the vertices, the faces, the edges, right? And so the first thing you need to recognize is that this deformation is not happening to the whole object, it's happening to these things, right? It's happening to the vertices, right? And so if I do this, like we're getting a deformation in this object, right? It's not a good one, but we're getting something, right? Now, all of these deformers can be found in most of the Maya menus. It's in the modeling menus because, frankly, deformers are good modeling tools. Like sometimes you have an object that is just a bent cylinder. And so just taking a cylinder, putting a bend deformer on it, bend it, you're done, right? So it's in modeling, it's in rigging, it's also in animation. So you'll be able to find this deform menu in there. And I'm just going to click on it and click these little double lines there to kind of tear it off so we can see it, right? All of these are affecting all of the vertices of our object, right? So since our object is really just one long edge tall, right, that means we can't bend it, right? We can't twist it. We can't do anything because that edge is always going to be straight, right? We can't make a curved version of that edge, right? So if we want this thing to deform, we just need it to be a little more spans in there, more mesh to deform, right? So I'm going to go to my poly input, polycylinder here input, and I'm just going to make some more subdivision heights, just so it's got some more things to deform, okay? You all should be able to, yeah, you can see that all right. So there's a ton of different deformers in here. Some of these I don't really want you to worry about too much, like a rack deformer. A rack deformer is when you have an object moving and you want that object to deform something else, right? So think of it as you have your character modeled, you put a shirt on them, and you want their torso to be what deforms the shirt, right? Problem with that is shirts don't really deform, they simulate, and so that doesn't really, it's kind of a quick approximation of something like that. And there are times to use it, there are times to not use it. A couple of them are kind of simple. So for example, there's this cluster, right? A cluster is just an object I can create, let me undo that. A cluster is just an object I can create to affect a certain set of vertices. So the first thing I have to do is select the vertices. So let's say I just want to affect these. Right? I'm going to go ahead and open up my channel box as well. Let's say, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger of a selection. Right? Let's say I just want to affect these. I can create this cluster while I have those selected. You'll see I get this little cluster handle, right? And you'll see that there's a little C in there. And if I grab that C, I can animate that section of vertices. Now that's not very pretty, right? But let's sort of look at why that is. It's because that cluster is animating all of those vertices 100%. Right? So most deformers also have the option to affect the influence of your deformer. Right? So right now that cluster is influencing all of those vertices completely, like 100%. But maybe like those vertices on the edges, I want it to affect a little less, right? Let's say I want it to sort of be a softer fall off to the parts that I haven't selected, right? Most of the time Maya uses what is called painting weights to control this. So you'll notice that all of these top parts up here, these are deformers we can use, right? These are some deformers. This is like some ways to edit some of those deformers. Down here at the bottom though, we see some repeats of stuff like cluster under the tab of paint weights. So if I click cluster to paint the weights, we get this. It turns my object either black or white. Right? The thing you'll notice is that the parts that are being completely affected by that cluster are white. The parts that are not being affected at all by that cluster, they weren't even in my selection, they're black. Right? So if we think of that in terms of luminosity value, right? If you were in Photoshop, black is 0, white is 1, right? And so we can have a range from 0 to 1 to affect this. Now, how you affect this is with the tool menu. So we are in the Paint Weights tool, and for those settings, like this, that's under this little hammer up here at the top. Right? Can you all see this up here in the very top corner? There's like, it's right next to your channel box tab, right underneath our workspace. It's a little hammer with 3 dots. We click that, it's going to open it up. We can mount this in here if we want to. And so this is all of my Paint Weights tools. And so we'll be using this again for some other stuff, right? But I could go in here and paint areas a value of 1, which is white, or a value of 0, which is completely black. My radius here is, I can control that just by adjusting the slider, or I can just hold down B in my viewport and click and drag and resize it, right? So I've moved this down to 0, which means I'm painting black, right? And I can just kind of do that and paint away that influence, right? Or I can put it up to 0.5, right? And paint half of that influence. Now that's the problem with painting weights. If you've never done this, painting weights is a pain in the butt. Like, it's just so tedious, and you'll accidentally paint something you didn't mean to, and you'll think it's working right, and then it just messes up. So just recognize that we all work through that struggle together. Like, there's not a secret button I haven't taught you. Painting weights just sucks. Like, it's just difficult. So something I'm going to try is this smooth right here. You see it? So I can paint smooth, right? And it's going to just sort of soften that edge. But I can also flood a percentage of this, right? Like, if I wanted to set it back to replace, right, and set this at 0.5, if I hit flood, it's just going to flood the entire selection that I have there, which is all of the vertices that the cluster is affecting. It's going to flood them with 0.5, right? So now my cluster isn't going to completely control it. It's only going to half control it, right? So go ahead and flood that back at 1, right? So I can flood smooth as well. And if I just start clicking flood smooth, see I get something like this, right? sort of a spongy fall off to it, right? And now I have this one object that I can set keyframes on that will bend in a very specific way my my cylinder here, right? So let's say I wanted it to look like somebody threw something at it and it dodged it, right? So as this ball is flying at it, I want it to look like it dodges it. And that's the only thing I need that for, is to be able to animate that one little dodge before it goes back to normal, right? Right? So it's a really quick way of setting up some basic rigging. Now, if I want this cluster to be part of this long-term rig, there's some extra stuff I have to do, right? Because if I move my model, right, my cluster doesn't go with it. But if I move my cluster over here, it still affects it as if it did, right? And then vice versa, if I actually parented this cluster under my model, it just blows it up, right? So there's some tricks to how we do this, and I can show you some of that. Really, the answer is I would probably just create an object and put both the cluster and the model under that object as a control, right? So we have that set up. Let's look at some other deformers. So we've already talked about in previous classes, right? I'm just going to go ahead and delete that deformer, and I'm going to go ahead and delete my history, just so it forgets that I put a deformer on there before. Okay. So we've already seen some other deformers, and you'll remember the nonlinear deformers from the principles classes, right? So we go to, actually I already have it open over here. My deformers menu, I can click nonlinear, and we've already seen bend, right? So if I choose bend, it created this little bend handle that hides out inside of the model, right? And if I bend that with curvature, I can get something like this. I'm only able to get that because I have enough divisions to bend it, right? And recognize that the bend deformer and the object are two different things, right? So if I move this bend deformer, it's going to change how my object is affected. If I needed to go with it, I can, I can parent it underneath it, but this is going to affect it, right? But if you think about it, that's really neat, right? If I needed just a cylinder to go around a curve really quickly, right? All I have to do is set up this little setup like this, right? And then I can grab my cylinder and just animate with 2 keyframes, right? Move it there, go over to here, move it down to there, right? And when I hit play now, right, I can get that, right? If we hide this cylinder where we can't see that, like that looks like it was complicated, right? But it wasn't. I did it in like under 10 seconds. That's where these deformers come in handy. Is let's say you just needed one scene where it looked like a laser beam bounced off something else, right? Maybe that's how you do it, is with a deformer, and you put a glow on that cylinder, right? The thing that is sort of unspoken, but we should probably speak it more often, is that your job is to learn how to solve problems, right? And so there are tools for solving these problems that sound like the right tool, right? I need a glass of water to slosh around in a glass, right? And so you're like, oh, Bifrost, I'm going to have to do a fluid simulation. That's going to take me approximately 40 hours, and then it's going to take like 3 days to render. I'm like, yeah, you could just put a ripple deformer on a cylinder and then texture it to look like water, right? Like you only have to get pixels onto the screen that people believe. That's really hard. But that doesn't mean that they have to be like obeying or that you have to use the tool that has that name to create, right? And so this is really like, I guess this would be called just like the miscellaneous day of how we would teach this, right? Like there's so many little things that you have to sort of think around corners and be like, yeah, I could use Bifrost, but maybe I could also solve it easier, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and delete that deformer, right? The deformer, delete these keyframes too. The deformer we're all most familiar with is joints, right? Or bones, whatever you want to call them. Different programs call them different things, right? And we can usually only find those under the rigging menu. So I'm going to go ahead and go to rigging, okay? These are a whole separate set of deformers that aren't found under our deformer menu. Again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but remember that there's a whole bunch of other nonlinear deformers as well. Like there was the squash and stretch. And you probably remember all of these from, oh, I had the wrong thing selected. You probably remember all of these from principles like the bouncing ball and the bottle, right? Squash. And so now we can use this factor to affect it and get some squash and stretch, right? So there's a lot of different deformers in that nonlinear, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's a couple of others in here that are pretty nice. Right? But the one that we are kind of most familiar with as a deformer is joints, right? And that's because we need that for complex deformations, right? Extremely complex deformations, which usually means something organic, something living. Any creatures that you have, you're probably going to need to put some joints in there and skin it, right? A joint and a skin are really two different objects, right? The deformation is happening from the skinning, right? A joint is just a bunch of pivot points that are all parented together. You can make joints and never skin them to anything, and like they're just in your scene, right? It's the same thing as just an invisible object that never renders, right? It doesn't start counting as a deformer until you skin it to a bunch of vertices. So really, all this is a hierarchy that affects specific vertices, right? So let's go ahead and make some joints. I usually do mine in one of the orthographic views. We're going to go to the front view. That will work nicely, right? I'm going to go skeleton, create joints. So once I've done that, I can click here, and I usually do it in the side view with my object at the center point, and the reason for that is because that's where it's going to make my joint chain. Right, if I start making it in this view, like who knows where those things are ending up? Like look at that. That doesn't make sense, right? So I usually make it in the front view or side view, and I'll just go ahead and start clicking here, click there, hold down Shift. And the reason I hold down Shift is because then it lets me constrain it to straight up and down, right? And then I can just go through here, add some joints, right? Now, again, this is just a bunch of pivot points. If we look over here in our outliner, it's just a hierarchy. Joint 1, joint 2, joint 3, joint 4 is this little one on the end, right? If I move joint 3, joint 4 goes with it. If I move joint 2, joint 3 and 4 go with it, right? It's just a hierarchy. And the same goes with rotation. If I rotate joint 2, 3 and 4 go with it, right? However, when I'm rotating joint 2, I'm only affecting the rotation of joint 2, right? So this can be a little confusing to people because they will select the top joint and think they have everything selected. They don't. If you look over here, I just have joint 1 selected, right? If I want to select them all, right, I can highlight all of them. Right? Now usually, in terms of setting up this, like for skinning, I can just select the top one and it'll be fine because it recognizes we're going to do this entire hierarchy. I'm going to select the joint, I'm going to select the model, right? And this is where we turn it into a deformer. We go to skin, and it's bind to skin. So what this means is it's going to take that mesh and it's going to make the selected joint chain a deformer for that mesh. And then it's going to do its best to guess which vertices we want to be affected by which joints. Right? Sometimes it gets it right, sometimes it gets it wrong. Right? So if I go ahead and hit bind skin, actually let me go to the options and show you some stuff. These are all the options I have on how we skin it, right? Usually it's bind, this is the defaults, right? And the bind method is closest distance. We could also do closest in hierarchy. We can do heat map, which works really well when it works, but when it doesn't work that well. Or geodesic voxel, right? Let's just try heat map, because when heat map works, it's great. When it doesn't, it just says, never mind, it's an error, right? I hit bind skin, and it takes it a little longer, but really all we did when we were choosing that was determining which method Maya was going to use to automatically assign weights to these vertices, right? Heat mapping is probably going to work. Wow, look at that. That's beautiful. Look at that. Perfect. Right? So that's what Control Z is for. There we go. Let's try it again. Skin, bind skin. Let's try geodesic voxel. See what that does. Nothing. Undo it again. Okay. Skin it. Skin. Bind skin. I guess we're just going to have to do... It should do it to all of them just because I have joint hierarchy selected here. Those two are actually the newer version of skinning. Who asked that? Just out of curiosity, so I don't have to talk to you. I thought so, I just want to make sure. Geodesic voxel and heat mapping are like the two newer ones that work the best when they work, but when they don't work at all. But usually as long as we have the setting for joint hierarchy, it will choose everything underneath joint one, and it'll be fine. So, I mean, I can choose them all too, but this usually works. So I guess that leaves us with closest in hierarchy or closest distance. I'm going to go ahead and use closest in hierarchy, hit bind skin, and what is happening to this thing? Huh? Apparently not. Let me undo some stuff here. This may be because I didn't delete history earlier. So let's see here. I'm just going to go to modify, freeze transformations, and edit, delete by type, history. That's probably where I put those other deformers on it. It was messing it up. So let's see if any of those work now. Bind skin, closest in hierarchy. Really? Huh? Maybe you're right. Let's try it one more time. This is weird because this is like, this should not be giving me this much trouble. Skin, bind skin. Let's just leave it at joint or closest distance. It could also be that I'm just skinning a really small object. Wow. Skin, bind skin. Let's do this. Reset settings. Deleted that, didn't I? Let me sit down and see what I'm doing here, because that doesn't make sense. Maybe I don't have it on top of it. Where's my, oh. Well, that might have something to do with it. Why in the world would it do that? Okay, let's fix that. 0. There we go. That's going to work better now. So let's go ahead and try that heat map now. Yeah, there we go. And so you see, heat map gives us what feels a little bit more like a natural joint deformation there, but it's a little like close. So that would work really well with elbows. I'll go ahead and undo that one more time. Let's try one more time and just use the defaults. So edit, reset settings, bind skin. I'm going to increase my drop-off rate. just going to reset them and just take what it gives me. Okay, so hopefully that'll feel a little bit softer there. Yeah. We may be able to take that number down even more and get something better. Let's try it one more time. So instead of 4, let's try like 1. There we go. So now I'm getting a little bit more of what I was hoping for. That's maybe a little too much, but like that's a little bit of a softer deformation now, right? So maybe let's try 3. So I'm just trying to see if I can get like a little bit of a softer bend on that so it doesn't feel quite so segmented. Now, either way, if I get to this point and I'm like, you know what, I really need that to be even softer, I can always go back in here to that Paint Skin Weights tool, right? So it's under Skin, and then Paint Skin Weights. I think it's also under Deformer. There may be no, there's not one in there for Deformer. So Skin, Paint Skin Weights, and it's going to be the same tool settings. So I can just do this smooth flood a whole bunch on all the different joints. And in theory, that should soften out that deformation a little bit more. It's not going to be perfect, but maybe we'll make it a little less hard looking. And so now when I move these joints, I get a little bit more of a bend in it, right? That's a little softer. Now, in general, we usually want these joints to do a whole bunch of different stuff, but realize that this is pretty much our pendulum, right? I just need to be able to animate those 4 things, and I can, you know, let's say I go in here, grab all 4 of these, hit S, go out to here, hit S. I'm going to move this one. I have auto key turned on. Rotate this one, rotate this one, right? I'm getting this like drag, and then when I get to here, I could continue moving, but rotate past that, right? Get all of these to rotate to here. And you'll see that what I'm getting is still kind of that pendulum feel to it, right? And I can also go through here just like I could before and offset those keyframes, right? And so it's probably not going to have too much to it, but kind of get that flip through now, right? Okay. Everybody's favorite deformer, the joints. How many of you hate rigging? How many of you hated rigging the robot in the principles class? All right, that's cool. It's good to know about yourself, right? It's good to learn as much as you can about yourself. So I'm not really going to make you do a full rig. In fact, I'm going to give you some very simple objects because there will be classes where you have to do full rigs. So it's what the technical direction class is. And so Marty Fitzgerald teaches that one. I think you'll really like that. A lot of people are surprised. Like a lot of people hate the robot, hate that, but it's also like you're just fighting with so much in that class, right? So don't judge it too harshly. Give it another chance. But these are just some of the deformers we've had in there, right? So I'm going to show you a couple of other things, though. Really just one other thing, which is a completely different kind of deformer, okay? This deformer is called a blend shape. Maya calls it blend shapes. Max, Unreal, they call them morph targets, okay? And this is for something that you need to deform in a very specific way, and you just are like, the easiest way for me to do that is to just rearrange all the vertices and put them in a different location, right? An example of this is usually the face. A lot of people use blend shapes for rigging faces. So you need one version of the face where the face is smiling, and one version where the face is frowning, and one version where the face is saying ooh, and one where it's saying and one where it's saying, right? You need all these different shapes, and like the reason my face is able to get into all of those orientations or configurations is because there are literally hundreds of muscles in there, right? Like pulling and pushing all over the place. Let's not worry about that. I mean, you can rig a face with a bunch of joints, but that's just one of the examples that people use, right? Another one may be a dent, right? Like, let's say you have an animation where a character is just taking a baseball bat to a car, right? Just get out that pent aggression, right? When you hit a car with a baseball bat, how that's going to wrinkle and dent is not like easy to control with a rig, right? Sometimes you just need a dented version of a car and the undented version of a car, right? So that's what blend shapes are for. Let me just kind of show you how these work, right? So I'm going to create just a simple sphere, right? And I'm going to open up my blend shape editor. So the easiest way to do this is to go to Windows, Animation Editors, and this Shape Editor. There. So right now there's nothing in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a blend shape node. The blend shape node is where all of our different shapes are going to live. Right? We can either turn that completely on or completely off. This is the deformer. Right? We can have an infinite number of shapes underneath that, but first we need a deformer. So with the object selected, create a blend shape, right? And what you see is I have this slider from 0 to 1, and if I affect that, nothing happens. That's because this is how you turn the blend shape either on or off, right? Actually, all deformers have this slider. It's called the envelope, right? This is how you could, if you have that bend deformation happening, and you want to turn it off so you can look at the model undeformed, you just turn the envelope all the way down, right? So let's not worry about that right now. What we need next is a target, right? Our original shape was a sphere, right? I want to give this sphere some horns, right? So, and I want it to grow those horns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my sphere, and I'm just going to hit Add Target. Now this is going to put me in what's called edit mode, right? Or at least for blend shapes. And you can tell you're in edit mode because we have this P-sphere 2, and it's written as edit, right? And so I can go in here, if I wanted to, I can rename this, and I'll call it horns, right? But while I'm in edit mode, and you see that it's turned all the way on, I can start changing my model. Right? So I'm just going to go in here and grab some vertices. I'll grab this one, I'll grab this one, right? And I'll just move it up, right? It's not the, turn symmetry on and do this correctly, but yeah, let's do that. So I get him some horns. Go ahead and hit B to get soft select. Turn my soft select way down. Move that up just a little bit more, right? Maybe move that out a little bit. Scale that out a little bit. There we go. And so now my model has horns. Go ahead and hit B, right? And what you may be thinking is like, I ruined my model, right? I had this perfect sphere, now I've given it these ugly horns, I'm not a good modeler, blah, 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 right? But I haven't. I've just made a deformation blend shape. And what this blend shape is a linear transition between my original mesh and this deformation. So if I uncheck edit, I'm no longer in edit mode, so I don't want to manipulate any of the vertices anymore. But if I just turn this slider up and down, I can go back to my original model. So if I'm at 0, none of these blend shapes are on there at all, right? And that one, they're on. This button right here allows me to key that transition, so I can animate that coming on or off. Let's go ahead and turn it off, and let's create some more blend shapes, right? Let's say I want one where my head here sort of crinkles in the middle, right? It sort of pinches in the middle. So I'm going to hit Add Target, and so I'm in edit mode again on this one. Right? I'm just going to go in here and select this entire edge around here and hit B to sort of soft select and just kind of scale that in, right? Make my brush a little bit bigger. Scale that in, right? So I get a version of that. Right? Again, I can go out of edit and you can see that my blend shape allows me to turn that on and off, right? We'll call this pinch. Right. Let's create another one. Recognize that I can use my sculpting tools on this as well. So my object selected. What's happening? Oh, my blend shape selected, my object selected. I hit add target, right? And then if I wanted to go in here with my sculpting tools, let's say I wanted to use my grab tool, recognize my brush size is huge. This is maybe where you would also want to bring up your tools menu again, right? So I can take my brush size way down, or I can hold down B to do that. Right? I can do some symmetry, object X, right? And I can just sort of, let's not do that. Let's sort of pull down, give them a chin, right? Something like this. So I have a new blend shape. It gets a chin, right? I can just keep adding more and more targets. So let's do this one. I can sculpt in here. Whoa, let's turn down my strength. 0.5. Whatever I want to it. But if I hold down Control, I can kind of push in, do something like that, right? Let's say I'm done making these, right? I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to uncheck Edit, and I'm like, now I want to now I want to animate my model, right? So all of these things I can turn on and off, right? I can turn on my horns. I can turn on my pinch. The cool thing about that is I can turn on any percentage of that. I can just have like half of a pinch, right? And I can combine them. Right? So these are additive, which means they are adding this displacement of the location of the change of the vertices, right? So for the horns, I grabbed a couple of vertices, I moved them upwards and forwards a little bit, right? And so it's just going to add that change to any other change I make to this. So if I want to turn my horns halfway on, and turn my pinch halfway on, and turn my chin all the way on, and then give my character a little bit of some eyes, right? Like I can do any percentage of these, right? And I can animate those things going on and off as I want them to. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick animation of these. Actually, let's set them all to 0. And just go through here and hit key on all 4 of those. Go to maybe frame 15, and I'm going to turn on my horns, the pinch, the chin, the eyes, do something like that, right? And you see that I have auto key turned on, so it automatically keyed all of those. Go a little further here. I'm going to turn the horns all the way up, but I'm going to take that pinch out. I'm going to turn the chin all the way up, but take the eyes out, right? And so now you see as I blend through here, it's all just going to adjust it in that very specific way. Now, this is something that doesn't happen automatically. You have to type it in, but you see I'm blending between 0 and 1, right? Let's say I get up here and I get to this point and I'm like, you know what, I wish those horns were just a little bigger. Well, a couple of things I can do. I can go back into edit mode and I could change them. I could change that version of my edit. Or I could also go in here and set this to 1.5. And so it's going to take my displacement I already did and crank it up even higher, right? Let's say for my little eye bulge thing that I did here, let's say I wanted it to go the other way. Let's say I wanted them to bulge out, right? I could set that to -1. We get that, right? Now the thing you'll notice that's a little bit frustrating is none of those keyframes are appearing on my timeline, right? For me to be able to see those, I need to select the blend shape node, and right now I have the object selected, right? The blend shape node is right here. Like it's in my inputs, right there, blend shape, and if I click that, you'll see my keyframes, and if I open up my animation menu, you'll see that all of those different shapes, horns, pinch, P-sphere 2, P-sphere 3, where I got lazy and didn't name them, all of those have curves, right? If I wanted my horns to sort of pop in and out, right, I go in here, keys, add key tool. I could do all over the place here with this animation. Right? And now his horns pop in and out, right? So, the problem with this is all of these deformations are linear, right? So, if I need my characters' horns to feel like they wave, like they kind of come up in an arc, it's not going to do that. It's going to transition them from point A to point B, right? And so that means you're not going to get any arcs out of this blend shape. I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. Object mode, I'm just going to delete this. If I created a cylinder here, right? Go ahead and give me a few more subdivisions in there. So let's say I made a blend shape for that. I selected create blend shape. I want to add a target. And in that target, I'm going to grab all of these vertices and I'm going to rotate them to where it's like, kind of like it's bending, right? Like maybe something like this. So it looks like it's bending, right? But Maya just recognizes that as two different orientations of all of those vertices, right? And so if I turn that on and off, it's not going to bend forward. It's going to do that, right? So just recognize that that's a little bit of the weakness of it, right? All right. Why am I showing you all this? Because I'm going to give you an animation challenge, right? Think of this as a take-home pop quiz. It's all right. It's going to be fun. You're going to like it. It's actually already up on the network. Those of you who are explorers by nature may have already found it. Under Animation Fundamentals, Resources, we've had, where is it? Oh wait, I haven't put it over there yet. That's where it is. Let me get it really quick. So, we've had falling objects, we've had swinging objects, and now we are going to have deforming objects. Okay. What you're going to find in here is a Maya scene file. So I will say what I just did was bad. I double-clicked on that, right? And you can tell that's bad because if you look closely in the resources folder, somebody else has done that. And then they started incrementing and saving, and it was just saving their increments up there where they had that. So that's all right. And like it's very easy to do. I've done that before too. And like, where's it saving on my files? So make sure you pull that down. But this is the scene you're going to get, and it's really not that impressive. It's a plane with a cylinder, two cylinders, and a ball, right? And if I hit play, nothing's happening. That's your part. That's what you do, is make stuff happen. What should we make happen? You'll be able to find that in the Deforming Objects Movies folder. There's an example movie. Let's watch that with VLC. So, that was made with the various deformers we've talked about today. Right? tell you that none of those deformers are squash and stretch. Right? I want you to try to make something similar. It doesn't have to be exactly this, right? But make the make the yellow cylinder hit the purple ball and knock it into the blue target thing, right? How they deform, that's up to you, right? I want you to watch this one frame by frame, right? Just so you can see what's happening in here. Actually, my skinning on this could be better, which means I just gave you a clue on how I did that. But if we watch this, I think there's a... Is there a way to slow this video down? Probably. Let's just play it. I'll hit pause on it, right? So look at some of these shapes I'm getting out of here, right? Like that's the like flying through shape, right? If I go back here and hit. I bet that is it. Exercise. So you can watch some of this stuff in here, like get these weird ripples in there, right? Maybe look at even where it's. I have to play it all the way through. Deform. Here we go. So I'm getting all these weird impact stuff, right? And so you already know all of the principles of animation, and really, I'll be honest with you, this doesn't have that much animation in it. This took me maybe 15 minutes, right? It has a lot of deformation, right? I'm lying. It took me maybe 25 minutes, right? I think that you can pull this off pretty easily, right? Having said that, let's look at the schedule really quick. How we done on time? We're okay. Where is the schedule? I knew I was going to need D2L for some reason. Bless you. So we got D2L over here. So this is where we are right now, is Deformers, right? That's where I gave you that exercise. I have that listed wrong. The deformation, squash, warp, all that stuff is listed in the wrong lecture time. So as I have it right now is we're mainly just going to have one day to do this. I know that I used up a lot of class time today, and that doesn't give you a ton of work time. So what I was thinking, let me look at this really quick and just think about restructuring this. Because what we're going to kick off next is project 3. I want to give you enough time on that, right? So let's do it, but I'm not really going to be doing a ton of extra lectures. So let's say, bless you, we're going to aim at looking at this one next class period in the last hour of class. Right? So you have this, instead of me giving you a lot of extra work time at the end of class, I'm going to give you a big chunk of work time at the beginning of class. I would suggest that you get to that point earlier than not. Like maybe try to come in with at least a good pass at it and using that last little bit of work time to sort of finish that up. Having said that, I'm going to make rendering on this one optional. That way you're not just coming in early at the beginning of class. I'd like a play blast of it, but I think it renders pretty nice though. Well, not really nice, but it looks okay. So if you get it done early, go ahead and render. So we're getting something like this. And so I think it'll look neat once you get that animation on there. So this should be a fun one because I haven't walked you through any of this, right? This is just you trying to make this look good. Right? This may require you to do a little research, like Google smear frames, Google squash and stretch, like look up reference of how other animators have made very cartoony looking stuff, right? Because that was kind of the point of this one is like, let's try to make this one really cartoony, right? And again, take it back to playback, we'll play it at the normal speed. Which, I'll be honest, there's some little things I would still add. Yes. Go on. Questions about this one? Hi. You can solve this however you want to. Like if you decide you want to use some clusters on this, that's cool. If you want to use some joints on this, that's cool. If you want to use the bend modifier, that's cool. Recognize that my little yellow thing there that's flippy flopping, because it has so much overlapping action, means I probably didn't use the bend tool, because the bend tool just kind of bends the whole thing one way or the other, and you can't get very much of that drag and overshoot in it, right? So, and again, I know this needs a lot of cleanup, but this is just sort of the first pass at it. Any questions on this? Yes?
How much creative space?
I will, the exercise for this one is pass fail. So as long as you use some deformers to animate that object knocking the ball across there, just go wild with it. I would rather you try something experimental that doesn't work that great and learn a lot about the tool than copy exactly what I have here. I mean, you're welcome to copy exactly what I have here. You'll learn something from that too. But yeah, feel free to run wild with this. This is, to me, I kind of inject this one in here because this is a little bit different, right? And hopefully, like all of these exercises, this, Mr. Miyagi stuff we've been doing with these exercises, hopefully this is to remind you that this can be kind of fun. Like you can do whatever you want to in animation. And I think these tools you're gonna find them pretty beneficial later on for stuff like, we'll get the BendBot character, and occasionally people are like, oh, I want BendBot to be able to blink, but he's not rigged to do that. Well, you can figure that out. Like we can make BendBot blink. Like that's doable. So this is sort of a problem-solving exercise. Just have fun with it. So yeah, you can go as wild as you want to with it. Questions, comments? All right, cool. We have a little bit of time left over in class. I think this class ends like 5:05, so you're welcome to use that however you want to, or if you're like, I'm really tired of your voice, Marlo, I'm leaving. That's cool too. So, yes. Oh. Let me go and stop the video and just kind of hop